Hey everybody, this is Tom Salemi. Welcome back to the DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast. We're a week removed from DeviceTalks Boston, but you're going to get a little taste of it today. Thanks to this week's episode sponsor, Clary. You'll hear more from Andy Byrne, the founder of Clary, a little later in the podcast. But we're going to bring you the keynote interview that I did with Tom Polen, of course, the CEO of Becton Dickinson. Tom Polen and I spoke the morning of the start of DeviceTalks Boston. So he was a major kickoff point for the event. We were in the large room, of course, and it was jam-packed. Thanks to everyone who made their way to DeviceTalks Boston. And thanks, of course, to Tom Polen for sharing his time and his insights. We talked about how he found his way into medtech, how BD responded to the pandemic, what BD has done to sort of reorganize itself and reorient itself through a number of acquisitions. We'll talk about those as well. And also some interesting conversations about succession planning at BD and the unique track record they have in bringing CEOs on board. So Tom Polen was very generous with his time and with his insights, and I'm sure you'll enjoy this conversation. Before we hear from Tom Polen, of course, we'll have Chris Newmarker, Executive Editor of Life Sciences at Mass Device, delivering the award-winning Newmarker's Newsmakers, parentheses, he didn't win an award, but he would if there were such an award for such a thing, end parentheses. So we'll have Chris Newmarker in talking about the top 5 stories for the last 2 weeks, including some that broke during DeviceTalks Boston. And then we'll roll into the Tom Polen interview. Before we begin anything, though, I would like to bring in our sponsor, Clary. Clary is a very cool revenue management company. You're going to hear about it in this interview that we did with Andy Byrne, the CEO of Clary. Let's listen to part 1, and I'll bring you parts 2 and 3 throughout the episode. Well, Andy Byrne, welcome to DeviceTalks Weekly. Could you tell us a little bit about Clary?
Sure. Well, thank you, Tom, so much for having us on the show. Really appreciate it. Clary is a revenue platform that helps CEOs, CROs, and chief commercial officers answer the most important question in business. Will they meet, beat, or miss on revenue? We are being used by great companies in the healthcare life sciences space like PerkinElmer, Henry Schein, lots of genomics companies, lots of robotics companies. And fundamentally, what the revenue platform does, our solution from Clary, is it allows sales reps to close deals faster, allows managers to drive more revenue. It allows execs to boost the predictability and accuracy of their forecasts. We are allowing companies to transform how they run revenue. And the value proposition is driving efficiency, driving more growth, driving more predictability across their entire end-to-end revenue process.
That's great. We'll hear more of Clary's story a little later in the podcast. If you want to find out more right away, go to its website, clary.com. That's CLARI.com. Now let's begin this episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast. All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
Chris Newmarker, you're not sitting next to me this week. So sad.
No, I know. That was fun. That was cool. That was fun.
Yeah, we were in the same state. It was so exciting.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. That was still feeling the glow. That was
still buzzing.
Good show.
Yeah, everyone did a great job. All the speakers were great. Sponsors were great. The staff was great. The weather was great.
Yeah.
A lot of positive comments from folks that really seem to thoroughly be enjoying themselves and
heard a lot of good comments.
Found
too.
it intensely valuable. Yeah, a lot of good comments from folks. And we'll just have to make it better next year. That's all.
Yeah. Hey,
got to keep doing it. Got to keep making it better.
We got momentum. Well, it'll be even better next year. And now we're back home. I'm back here in Minneapolis on a Thursday afternoon, and it's chilly and rainy, and we were gonna record this, right at 2 p.m. Central Time sharp, and you were like, I'm going to get some coffee. I'm like, coffee sounds great.
Yeah, 3 p.m. my
Great
time.
coffee day.
Yeah, we had actually. It's not too bad now, but it was like 30. It was 40 degrees this morning. Like,
wow,
which isn't bad, but when you're kind of used to not being bundling up for your dog walk, it was like, oh man, I thought we was done with this, but
that's a little sad. Yeah, in May, you don't need.
Fortunately, it was great for Device Talks. Folks had great weather last week, so
that's right. The weather gods smiled on us last week for Device Talks. I was surprised to learn you do not grind your own coffee.
I don't. No, it's very loud. I'm very bad at it. I'm very imprecise. I honestly, I don't like. I don't really taste that much of a difference. I just
really.
No. I mean, it has to be ground, correctly.
Yeah.
But if I grind it myself, I'm not like, oh, that's a cup of coffee. Now that's what I'm talking about. It doesn't make that much of a difference.
Doesn't make that.
Yeah.
Are you worried you're maybe losing your sense of taste or something? Or
no, I think I'm placing my efforts and thoughts exactly where they need to be. I got off Facebook. I don't grind my own coffee. I don't change my own oil. I can delegate. Yeah,
I don't change my own oil anymore. I don't want to get oil in my driveway, but grinding coffee, that's like just an extra minute, and it just had some nice freshly roasted Peace Coffee beans, from Peace Coffee Minneapolis. Just ground them really quick, and
it's very loud.
It's a damn good cup of coffee. No, I got a little crop. It's
very loud. Believe me, I can't I get up early in the morning. If I put a fork down wrong on the counter, I'm going to hear about it. So Mrs. Device Talk doesn't listen to this podcast, so she has very good hearing, and it's at least all the time.
Are you kicking your ground coffee? Are you drinking Starbucks or like you drinking?
Yeah, we get it at the supermarket. I mean, if I find a nice coffee place, I'll buy coffee there, but we're all about the economy here at the Salemi household. So Starbucks, Pete's, whatever Stop and Shop has. Well, not whatever. Yeah. Those are the two go-to. I can't drink whatever, but those are fine.
It's not like the best part of waking. No folders in the house. Or
I tried to. I'm gonna probably delete this because we're down a really bad rabbit hole. But I made a folders reference to Steve Crow, our robotics lead, and he was like, "What?" Did we replace the coffee with this coffee? That was Folgers, right? Or was that something else? Was that Maxwell House?
Oh my gosh. I remember the Folgers jingle. I don't remember I don't remember if it was Folgers or Maxwell House or they did the we it's like, come on. Like, we replace this really great coffee
with this crap you can buy at the supermarket.
I had no idea.
Definitely deleting this.
We're gonna get sued by Folgers. Be great. Oh gosh.
All right. Yeah, well, thanks everyone who came out for Device Talks Boston. It was a great opportunity to gather, and we're working on next year, of course, but we've also started working on Device Talks West, which is happening October 18th and 19th. I'm working on that agenda right now, and that's fantastic. Really the next objective is to make that just as awesome as Device Talks Boston. So
just 5 months away.
5 months
Unbelievable.
Away. Coming up.
It's gonna be gone. It'll be there like that. It's just gonna happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So anyway, we've got some Newmarker's Newsmakers. We didn't get to necessarily do them last week. We kind of did an overview of the Device Talks Boston event with Joe Mullings and Peter Stebbins, and some real great thoughts there. If you missed that episode, please go back and check it out.
Yeah, so there's some big news going on, while we were holding the show. So I figured I'd throw that in as well. So we got kind of a 2-week Newmarker's Newsmakers this time.
All right. Well, so these are the top 5 stories for you. Some of these certainly broke during Device Talks Boston. So, Chris Newmarker, what is number 5 on the Newmarker's Newsmakers?
Well, number 5 on the list is that Siemens Healthineers just last week said that they were going to discontinue the use of Corindus surgical robots for cardiology. procedures. CFO of Siemens Healthineers, Jochen Schmitz, confirmed the strategy shift during the company's first quarter earnings call. He reportedly added that that they still have a timeline for robots for neurological operations to reach the market in several years. But this was referred to. I mean, people refer to this a bit during the show. And it's fair to say that there's the big companies that came in to compete against Intuitive in the soft tissue robotic space. I mean, they're fine. It's tough. It's hard. It's a competitive space.
Yeah.
Intuitive had a lot of ground there over the years.
Yeah, and I had a conversation with Mike Mahoney, the CEO of Boston Scientific. We did a keynote interview at the end, and asked him about why Boston Scientific never aggressively went into the robotics space. And one of his rationale was like that we're not a robotics company, we're a device company. We do devices really well. Intuitive does robotics very well.
Yeah.
Basically, stay in your lane and save the money. So that he wasn't speaking specifically to any other company, certainly not to Corindus, but the timing was interesting that the Corindus news, I think, had broken just that morning. So
yeah,
I suspect when I raised the topic, I suspect a lot of people's minds went there initially, but we've also had conversations about J&J. I mean, we had
they had some layoffs in California.
But we had Martin Buehler, or our colleagues at the Healthcare Robotics Engineering Forum had Martin Buehler, who heads surgical robotics for J&J, present. And while he gave a great presentation, I think people were looking for some more direction as to where J&J was headed, and that wasn't clear. So I think it's safe to say with the area is largely in flux, with the exception of Intuitive, which seems to be forging ahead at full speed. So, and we'll have an Intuitive story a little later in the Newsmakers.
Fantastic.
All right. So, well, that was certainly a big news, and you're right. It reverberated around the hallways at the Boston Convention Center.
Yeah, I mean, that seemed to be one of the big takeaways, was kind of this idea device companies, I don't know, kind of sticking to their knitting.
Exactly.
We got too excited about a bunch of things like digital health or whatever, and so it's kind of like getting back to some fundamentals. But
all right, it's number 4, Chris Newmarker.
Well, number 4 on the list, we've got FDA. It approved Abbott's Eterna spinal cord stimulation system for non-surgical back pain. So I mean, this is interesting, like an implantable neurostimulation device that could looks like it could hopefully provide another option for people with back pain that they aren't surgery isn't an option for them, so they're not eligible for it. So I mean, this should hopefully be some welcome news for people who suffer from intractable back pain.
So it's interesting. So the approval is for people who are not eligible to receive back surgery. So it's not for people who have had surgery and still have pain. So non-surgical back pain. No, it's a great technology. Clearly, there's others out there, Medtronic, Nevro, and others who have similar products on the market, or at least perform a similar function. And it always strikes me as the more the better in this sort of way, because I think people respond to different types of technologies.
Absolutely.
All right. Let us roll on to number 3, Chris Newmarker.
Hey, number 3 on the list, we've got Intuitive. They announced some executive leadership changes. They promoted Dave Rosa to the role of president of the company. I mean, Gary Gotthard, I mean, he's continuing on as Intuitive CEO. He's served in that role since 2020. And originally joined the company 27 years ago. But Dave Rosa is now going to be company president. He's going to lead Intuitive's product, digital, quality, regulatory, supply chain, manufacturing, commercial teams. And Rosa himself has been there for 27 years. So, any thoughts on this?
Well, we had Dave Rosa on the Intuitive Talks podcast earlier this year.
Yeah.
Super nice man. Thoughts? No, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, he seems to be the same generation as Gary Gotthard. So I'm not sure if I necessarily see it as a succession plan, as if he would be the next CEO, though perhaps Gary Gotthard has a timeline in mind when he'd like to stop being CEO, maybe become more of an executive chair or something. Certainly,
perhaps,
that's pure speculation. I have no insights on that,
totally,
whatsoever. Perhaps it's just a move to as we said earlier, Intuitive is doing so well that, they're growing at a pace, and splitting the duties like this between a CEO and president just makes stabilizes the organization, gives it more direction, makes a clear chain of command, the chain of command clearer, and for different things, because now Rosa is leading. It says Rosa now leads Intuitive's product, digital quality, regulatory, supply chain, manufacturing, and commercial teams. So, I mean, it is almost everything.
Yeah, it sounds like most of the company. Yeah, right.
I mean, the only thing I don't see there is, I guess product would be engineering. Yeah, so it is most of the company. So perhaps this does give Gary Guthart more the ability to look towards strategy and toward growth, while Dave Rose is managing the day-to-day. So it's kind
of the same way, like U.S. president has a chief of staff who's kind of handling all the kind of more kind of like the day-to-day operations. While the president can actually think more strategically about things. So maybe that's as I said, could be total speculation here, but yeah, it's. Yeah, it could be some kind. There seems to be some kind of, maybe perhaps it's an organizational improvement they're looking at with this.
Yeah, for sure. But it's unusual to see this seismic a change without another shoe dropping in a couple of years. So, but we'll see. So yeah, Dave Rose has been there for 27 years. I'm looking up now. He joined in 96. Which is roughly when Gary Guthart joined, I believe, as well.
Yeah.
So they definitely came up the ranks together.
Well, you know what? I think you need to have Dave back on soon and be like, hey, what's going on?
I think so. No, I think we definitely do. Or maybe, maybe we'll have him at an upcoming conference. Who knows?
Here we go.
Ooh.
Like device talk. Ooh.
Who knows? Nothing to report yet.
Who knows?
Stay tuned, everybody.
There we go.
But all right. Chris Newmarker, let's roll on to number 2.
Well, some sadder news here. We've got Cook Medical laying off 500 workers, about 4% of their workforce. This is one of the largest privately held medtech companies in the world, based in Bloomington, Indiana. We've been unfortunately, reporting on a whole string of layoffs in the industry. I mean, we're well over 18,000 workers let go across the industry since mid 2022, according to our mass device reporting. But Cook in its case is, saying that this was, part of kind of like a long, part of a long-term 5-year plan. This is like a strategic realignment for the company, and Pete Yonkman, the president of Cook Medical, called this the most difficult decision we've had to make in support of our strategy.
No, it's unfortunate. We've been talking about this topic for a long time, but I think we need to give credit where it's due. We've talked previously about companies not stating clearly how the workforce has been impacted. This is right up there on cookmedical.com. It's right up there in their website, explaining the whole decision and the why. And very straightforward, very extensive letter. I mean, give them credit, give Cook Medical credit, and President Pete Yonkman for communicating the why to its workforce. I think that shows a lot of consideration. So kudos to Cook Medical.
They were giving the affected employees in the U.S. kind of a heads up with this letter as well. I mean, they're saying they're actually saying if you were, if you decide every day whether to come in the office or stay home, that the next day was a day to, stay home, and that if you were affected, you'd be getting an email first thing in the morning from the company, detailing what was next. So I mean, it was a good long statement, explained why they were doing this, and giving, trying to make the effort to do people right. So that's appreciated.
And Chris Newmarker, you led a conversation at DeviceTalks Boston. You actually led off the whole conference with your conversation with Ashish Shah of Viant Medical, Holly Scott of the Mullings Group, and Paul Grant of the MedTech Innovator, sort of about the career building for engineers. Wondering, any thoughts or takeaways from that conversation?
Well, I mean, just definitely a sense that there is opportunity there, that that Yeah, I mean, we unfortunately do have people who are engineers, people who are experienced who are, are being let go right now. But I mean, this could be an opportunity to, do something exciting in the startup space. So, give it a try, be open to new opportunities. I mean, so, what may first feel like a setback can, turn into an opportunity.
No, for sure. Yeah, I think we'll hopefully see a rise in startups that will be requiring some experienced engineering help and experienced medical device help. But we're seeing other companies hire. We've seen a recent senior executive from DePuy who was let go during their layoffs. Took a senior position at Medtronic.
Yeah.
So I mean, there are ways to there are ways back into the medical device industry for sure.
Absolutely, and it's worth mentioning Boston Scientific right now. I mean, they're hiring. Their most recent earnings call was definitely one of the more positive, optimistic ones I've heard. So there's a bright spot right there in the device industry. Around the Twin Cities, AtriCure. I mean, they've told me they're hiring. I'm actually plan to stop out there next week and say hi to them. So find out some more about what they're doing over there. So there's definitely bright spots. It's definitely not all doom and gloom.
No, for sure. But we did hear from, we had a number of people attending DeviceTalks Boston who have been impacted, have been laid off.
Yep.
They were able to attend the meeting and they were able to bolster their networks a bit and were left, I think, feeling hopeful. So
yeah,
very, very grateful to those folks who came out. And I hope DeviceTalks Boston provided some hope and we'll be hearing good news from them in a couple of months.
Absolutely.
Or perhaps sooner.
Exactly.
All right, Chris Newmarker, let's roll on to number one.
Well, number one on the list, just, more rumors about Shockwave Medical. I mean, really, it is all just rumors right now, but, there was, some reporting in streetinsider.com where they're citing unnamed sources saying Medtronic and Johnson Johnson are, each have interest in the company. And this follows up like Bloomberg, reporting last month that Boston Scientific was eyeing Shockwave. So, and Tom, you asked Mahoney, and, well, he gave you, I mean, he gave you the standard, we're always looking for good opportunities answer pretty much.
Yeah, definitely we're always looking for,
right?
for I don't remember the exact phrase, but basically we're always looking at acquisition opportunities. Right. So he wasn't about to say much more than that. And but I'm happy he said that because he could have just stared me down and I would have moved on to the next question. So that was a great interview. So
he was a good sport with you with that question.
And also, I mean, we talked a bit about his. Well, we'll get into that a little bit, but no, I mean the Shockwave is. I mean, this is one of those situations. All these Shockwave rumors. I don't know if I think I'd be more surprised at this point if they were acquired than if they weren't acquired. Does that make any sense? Like the point where everyone's rumored to buy a company, you kind of wonder if anyone's going to buy the company. I don't know.
That's true. Like what's going on? Like everybody's like,
it's like who else? Who else is going to be rumored to buy Shockwave?
Edwards Life Sciences might buy.
There you go. Are you starting a rumor? Rumor.
No.
Chris Newmarker said.
I totally just made that up. Street Insider, do not use me as an anonymous source for your Edwards Life Sciences to buy article.
So we'll see where that goes. But no, Mike Mahoney was terrific. We talked about his career and how he came to choose the job at Boston Scientific when he was leading medtech at Johnson Johnson.
That was great.
It was great to just hear how he sort of made that decision. And in this upcoming interview, we're actually playing the other keynote interview I did with Tom Polen of BD, and going back to the intuitive conversation about Dave Rosa and whether this is a succession move or just a spreading of the responsibility move. Tom Polen said in his interview, and I forget the numbers, but I think it was BD, and I should have looked it up, had something like 7 or 8 CEOs over 125 years, and they were all homegrown. They were all picked internally. And I might have those numbers a bit wrong. As you listen to the interview, you'll find out whether I do or I don't. But what was interesting is Tom Polen said he already had sort of a succession plan in the works.
Wow.
It wasn't quite clear if he identified someone specifically or if he just sort of has like maybe 3 or 4 candidates who he'll be keeping an eye on to replace him as CEO someday. So it was interesting that he's only been on the job a couple of years, but he's already looking forward to who's going to take over the responsibility some days, which I think is super smart.
Yeah.
So
I think it's super responsible versus how not to handle a succession that you could see on the HBO series of that name. So that's how not to do it.
That is getting very dark. Yes. No, and it's, I didn't ask, I joked, I talked to Holly Scott in the Mullings Group recently, and it popped in my head when I was talking to Mike Mahoney. I'm like, I wonder if he has a succession plan left, but planned for himself. But I didn't ask the question just because it was a bit off base. But
yeah,
we did have, and you don't know who. So this again goes into pure speculation and also touting DeviceTalks Boston. But Megan Scanlon presented on the second day. She led a panel talking about LithoVue too, and she's fantastic. I'd be shocked if she weren't on a short list of if not Boston Scientific CEO position, other people's CEO positions. I think it's probably a matter of time before she's leading a company herself. I hope so anyway.
Definitely. No, I agree. Yeah. And it's definitely, it's something I hear around. I mean, I hear a lot of like extremely positive things about her. So yeah, it'll be neat to see what happens,
absolutely.
Like where she rises up in Boston Scientific, or exactly where she lands next. So yeah, it'll be interesting. Very cool.
That again is
total
pure
speculation.
Total speculation.
Are we doing like our speculation episode, Tom?
I don't know. I mean, why not? Give people some things to think about. We're not saying anything is based upon anything other than just our own observation, which
we're not pulling
take that for as many grains of salt as you'd like.
We're not pulling the old fashioned, like, I'm not saying anything, I'm just asking questions. Like, we're not doing that. Like, we're just
no, we're not doing that.
Exactly. No. Yeah, we're good.
But all right. Well, great job, Chris Newmarker. I'm sorry we're not sitting on the same stage again. But great job with the Newmarkers Newsmakers.
Thanks, Tom. Good to see you over Zoom.
Okay, before we begin this interview with Tom Polen, the CEO of Becton Dickinson, I'd like to bring back our sponsor, Clary. Once again, this is an interview I did with Andy Byrne, the CEO of Clary. Andy Byrne, tell us how Clary works with medical device companies.
Yeah, let's talk about some specific people that are in the sales process in medical device companies, and let's talk about the value that we deliver. So first, but take a look at a sales rep. They have so much manual data entry that they need to do. They don't like to do that. They have so many people to be running around to hospital, to clinicians, to doctors. And what that is such a painful process. So we help them by doing 2 things. 1, automating all of their manual data entry, simplifying their life. And then 2, helping them with a new experience that they've never had before that allows them to easily deduce where should they spend their time, where do they have risk, where do they have upside. We predict what deals will close as a win, what deals will not and maybe slip, what deals they'll lose. So it allows them to use these predictions, artificial intelligence, to automate their manual tasks, give them time back to sell, and as well as drive more deals and close more revenue. Now, on the manager side, the managers have all kinds of blind spots, and we eliminate those blind spots. What do I mean by that? They don't know who are the reps meeting with, what doctors, what use cases are they talking about, whether it's on the capital side or the clinical side. So the managers have a new level of visibility that they've never had that allows them to understand where they should coach, where they should spend time, that allows them to drive more revenue. And then finally, on the exec side, we get them out of Excel hell. We give them a new interface that allows them to accurately predict, will they meet, beat, or miss on revenue using machine learning that's analyzing all of their historical conversion rates, looking at all the activities that are happening across all of their deals, whether it's a capital sales motion or a clinical, more transaction oriented, and then allows them to be more predictable, more effective, and drive higher shareholder value.
All right, we'll hear again from Andy Byrne a little later in the podcast. Once again, if you want more information, go to clary.com. That's CLARI.com. Now let's begin the interview I did with Tom Polen, CEO of Becton Dickinson at DeviceTalks Boston. So So I'm very excited to have Tom Polen as our keynote speaker here. We're going to learn a bit about his career here, so I won't go into the intro, but Becton Dickinson clearly had been a central player over the last 2 or 3 years in answering the call for all that was necessary during COVID-19, and they have also managed to acquire a lot of cool companies and transform themselves as a company. So we have a lot to talk about. Tom and I will talk for a while. If there's time at the end, we can take a few questions. So my colleague Sean Hooley will be sprinting about with the microphone. So, Tom, thank you for joining us.
Good seeing you, Tom.
Yeah, this is great. No, this is we talked in January for the podcast and with this idea in mind, but I was very excited that you were making yourself available. You were our first speaker that we solidified. So
nice, I appreciate that.
So this is built upon your agreeing to be a keynote, so thank you very much.
A little overstatement.
So I know we covered it a bit, but I always like to get into a person's path into medical devices. So what was it about how did you find your way into the industry?
Sure. Certainly, I wasn't born in an ecosystem that kind of led me to med device. I grew up in very rural country, literally farmland. That was my first job, was baling hay. My parents both dropped out of college as they were sophomores in college. My mother got pregnant with myself, and so my dad dropped out of school to work, and my mom dropped out to raise me. I ended up being the first person in my family, extended family, to go to college. What brought me into medtech ultimately was an experience that ended up shaping not only the industry that I went into, but kind of my leadership style as well. I would attribute to, and some of the lessons that I hold very personal today. So when I was 13 years old, I have a sister who's 3 years younger than myself. She's in kind of the defense industry. And obviously my father and mother were raising me out there in the country, and we were getting ready for school one day. And my mother, who was extremely healthy, 35 years old at the time, collapsed right in front of me and died of a brain aneurysm, sudden massive brain aneurysm. And what we didn't know is, even if she was on the operating table, given the scale of it, there's nothing that someone could have done. But we ended up spending the day, as a 13-year-old, of course, seeing your mother go into convulsions in front of you, end up going to the local hospital, chasing the ambulance in your neighbor's car, ended up going there, having her go to shock trauma, ended up being pronounced dead by the end of the day. But going through that experience, as a very young teen, kind of made an impact on me around the importance of healthcare, the processes that I saw, and the opportunity to improve healthcare and to want to make a difference for others, because at the end of the day, we're all in an industry that we're very blessed to be in. I often tell, as we're recruiting MBAs, there's lots of cool industries you can go into. iPhones are cool, Teslas are cool, electric cars. AI is really exciting in many spaces. But at the end of the day, there's nothing else that matters in the world. As soon as someone or their loved one gets sick or ill, the only thing that anyone wants, beyond anything else that's cool in the world, right? My teenage sons think that Nikes are really cool. As soon as anyone or their loved one gets sick, the only thing that they want is for them to get well. And that's the industry that we're in, right? That's the business that we're all in, is helping people get well. So that attracted me to to healthcare overall, and we can get into the journey of what I went to. But I'd say that experience also ended up really leaving an impact on me from a leadership perspective. It's certainly because my father he was traveling, trying to move up through. He worked for Bell Atlantic back in the Big Bell days. Started as a lineman fixing telephone lines, but was working his way moving up, traveling. He had to go to his boss and say, "I can't travel anymore. I'm a single parent. I've got to raise these kids." His boss at the time, my impact on how I think about servant leadership, he said, "I understand." His name's Tom as well. I'm a junior. So he said, "Tom, fine, we're going to create a new job for you. It's not the same level job, but we're going to create a job for you that can allow you to focus on your family." So he ended up making a lot less, but he would go through walls for that company afterwards because of kind of how that boss met him from a personal basis. And that was kind of my first lesson in servant leadership. Certainly, I started working basically from 13 years on. I always work because we live paycheck to paycheck as a family. It was cool we can get that on Friday when my dad's paycheck would come in. So that kind of work ethic started with me very, very early on. And again, our purpose of what we do, which is advance the world of health, it's a very personal thing, having seen that firsthand and experienced it. So it's what brought me into healthcare ultimately, and certainly influences how I think about leadership as well in many aspects.
I can understand that. What sort of clarity does a traumatic experience like that give to a young person who's I mean, we all go through life not expecting tragedy to touch us, and when it does, you're changed forever. How did that change you forever, do you think?
Yeah, when I would always get 360 feedback, and they say that you're impatient, Tom, like you always are moving. I said, well, that's because I always think you don't know how long you're going to have, on the planet. So let's get things done and move things forward. Maybe that was a self-justification to the 360 feedback. But I think certainly that perspective of when I hit 35 years old, and you sit there and reflect, okay, you're actually older than your parent at that point in time. You just don't know. I think that's it's an important perspective to have.
And what was the direct path into medical devices? What was your first effort there?
My original master plan was to go to medical school.
Okay.
And so I was actually working at Johns Hopkins doing research in transfusion medicine and stem cell transplantation, getting ready for the MCATs. Out of undergrad, and ended up joining a small startup company, though, that was actually advertising at Hopkins. This was a Silicon Valley based company right in the middle of the dot-com boom based in Mountain View, California. I ended up engaging with them and joined as one of the first 5 or 10 folks in this startup company, which was a phenomenal experience as an early 20-something. Ended up spending a year in Japan, setting up the business there. And of course, as a startup with that few people, you're doing medical affairs, you're doing service, you're doing sales, you're fixing the instrument. This was in the kind of the cytometry cellular analysis space. And so ultimately, that's what brought me to BD. We grew the company up a bit, and then we sold it to BD Biosciences. So as you said, we've acquired 19 companies in the last 3 years, and it's a pleasure to be able to stand in front of those teams when we bring them, as part of our family and say, I came to BD the same way that all of you came to BD, and I remember exactly the way that first day felt. But that's how I joined BD.
Interesting. So a lot of companies, startup folks, when their company's acquired, they spend their year or two there, and then they go off to rinse and repeat. You stayed. What was it about BD that kept you there? And contrast, if you would, we were having a conversation just now about working in startups. Contrast the startup experience to life in a big company where I'm sure you have an abundance of resources and everything is available to you, and you just have to snap your finger. No, I'm just joking, of course.
That's smart. But so a couple things. One is BD is, I always tell folks, again, when we're talking to new associates to join BD is medtech. Right? You literally can have an entire career in medtech inside of BD. We have life sciences on one side with our diagnostics business and our flow cytometry business, deep in science on that end. Obviously through ultra high volume consumables with the most advanced manufacturing capabilities in the industry, as we're making 40 billion units a year, right? We make 6 devices for every human on the planet. I mean, in the time that we're going to be here in this room, over 4 million BD devices will be used. And then we have, on the other side, the interventional platforms from Bard, right, with surgically implanted ports and valves and stents and balloons, et cetera, with in between there, right, high-end automation, pharmacy automation, laboratory robotics, et cetera. So really the ability, and we highly encourage talent to rotate across businesses. So that's one is the industry is inside BD in a large part. I think the other thing is BD has a very historied and I think best in industry approach to talent development. We founded BD University decades ago, and it's been a core part of BD and who we are in building and advancing our culture. So we have a very focused part of our culture, leaders as teachers. So all of our top leaders teach as teachers in BD University. We have very structured approaches for leadership development. We have a close partnership with Wharton. We just sent a cohort for our GM Accelerator program. It's not just a standard Wharton course, but it's Wharton professors teaching things the BD way and what we want folks to know as BD leaders. A physical university? There's a place you go? Or it's a physical staff of BD University, but we hold it at different, at our campuses around the world. I gotcha. And we'll have thousands and thousands, like 8,000, 9,000 of our associates per year go through courses at BD University. So that focus on talent development at BD is something that certainly kept me as someone early in my career. And then the ability to rotate and do things across. I did leave for a short bit of time. I left for 5 years and went to a company up in Chicago. But that was really not my fault. I met my wife in between. She was a second-year resident at Bethesda Naval Hospital. And they had paid for her medical school. So you have to go where the Navy tells you at that point, or you go to jail. You get court-martialed, right? So she, of the 3 surgeons that graduated that year, 1 got sent to Guam, 1 got sent to Iceland, she got sent to Chicago. So I guess we lucked out in a way. But I left, followed my wife up to Chicago. I ended up joining Baxter up at that point in time because BD didn't have a facility there. And then when she got out of the Navy, she's now a breast cancer surgeon, but wanted to do her fellowship, had an opportunity to come back to New Jersey, and that's when I rejoined BD, coming back in. So, and gaining a different perspective from a different company.
Interesting. That's fascinating. So when did you, I'm intrigued by your career path in that I've seen other medtech companies look externally for their CEOs, or some who have maybe come in for a short time and have been elevated to CEO role. You rose to the bait. Other than the 5 years in Chicago, you were BD through and through. When was there a moment when you decided you wanted to be CEO and you kind of saw it as a viable path, or is it something you just keep rising to until it's the next step you get to take? I don't want to say have to take, you get to take.
Yep. So I have been with BD over 20 years, 23 years, and I'll never forget my exact anniversary because it was within a month or two of me becoming CEO. And one of the things is we have a lot of 20, 30, 40-year tenured individuals in BD. And when you hit 20, 30, 40 years, there's a letter that you get from the CEO. It's kind of, robot signed, congratulations on your tenure and all your contributions to BD. It's been tremendous, et cetera. And so I'll still never forget, I have the letter that says, "Dear Tom, congratulations on your 20-year anniversary with BD. You've been phenomenal and making an impact on the company, signed Tom Polen." At the end, so I should write more letters like that to myself. But I still have that as.
I'm sure it was heartfelt.
It was definitely heartfelt. But back to that topic. And the question again was, sorry.
When did you know? Was there a moment when you said, "I want that job"?
Yeah, no, and never actually. Not until maybe very late in that process. I always just focus on what I tell individuals as they're coming up in their careers is just focus on getting things done. Mm-hmm. Right, and that's always been my goal, is to just make the biggest impact in healthcare, the biggest impact on the company that I can, doing so with a growth mindset, right? We strongly believe in one of the things that we trained over 5,000 BD associates in is growth mindset. There's nothing that associates at BD can't do. There's just things that we haven't chosen to do yet, but always finding a way and doing it the right way. That's always been an important part of the mindset. And I think just doing that naturally, things good will happen.
And you ultimately became CEO, and it's one of those stories where you achieved something. I took the job at DeviceTalks 2019. You became CEO just prior to COVID, and then COVID hit. I'm curious, how did going in, did you have a sense of significant changes you wanted to make? Did you see things? I'm sure you conveyed it in your interviews where you wanted to go. Did you think that the furniture needed to be arranged? Were you a more stay-the-course CEO? What were your anticipations going in? And then we'll talk about how COVID did or did not change that.
Yeah. Well, we had spent a very thoughtful process as part of the transition. By the way, BD, so we're a 125-year-old company. I'm the 9th CEO in BD, so 125 years. 100% of our CEOs have been internally developed and promoted. Okay. No external hires in that period of time. It's something, and that helps drive a very consistent culture back to things that we value and how we operate as an organization, and across a very diverse groups of medtech as well. That why we encourage people rotating across. So when I came in, we had spent, I probably knew I was going to be CEO 1.5 years, up to 2 years before I became CEO, and so I had really a lot of time to think through, and we did a very thoughtful, spent a lot of time actually here in Boston with someone who had been that was at Harvard, who had been part of the last 2 CEO successions, who was a professor in organizational design that Vince and myself would fly up and meet with for kind of that last year as part of the handoff in our planning, and having him be a thought partner in that. But I had written a document called BD 2025, which is our strategy, and we really took a look back over the last 2 generations of CEOs and leadership in the organization, from Ed Ludwig to Vince, and had spent time reflecting on the journey that BD had gone on. Where we were then, 3 years ago, after we had just done CareFusion and the Bard acquisition, which dramatically scaled the company from a $7 billion company pre-CareFusion to going on a $20 billion company today with radically different capabilities, right? The old legacy of BD as this syringe and catheter company is very, very different today, right? We are one of the most connected medtech companies in the world with over 3 million smart connected devices. We're connected to more than 70% of all U.S. electronic medical records through our Pyxis, Alaris platforms. We have quite sophisticated $3 to $5 million robotic systems, right, with Keystra and our Parata pharmaceutical automation, and now we have 26 PMAs in our pipeline, a very active, set of more complex medical devices through the Bard acquisition. And so, right, reflecting on where we had come from, what we have today and where we were going, we developed BD 2025, which is a focus on accelerating growth, shifting us into higher growth spaces, while continuing to make the impacts that we make on healthcare, simplifying an organization that scaled up very quickly, and under the belief that something I say constantly in the organization is I'm a firm believer that complexity does three things. It makes it difficult for your associates to get work done, makes it difficult for your customers to do business with you, and it costs a lot of money, otherwise it's fantastic. Right, so we want to get rid of complexity. That's why simplify is a core part of our strategy. And then empowering our associates, which is driving that growth mindset, that servant leadership approach, and continuing that legacy of talent development in our organization, empowering people to move a large organization in an agile way. So that was our strategy, and we've been executing that. Despite COVID happening in the first kind of 60 days of my tenure, we never took our eye off the ball of BD 2025, and we're really happy with the progress that we've been making on that.
Well, what does complexity look like to you? Is it just too many steps to achieve one thing? How do you define it, and how do you know it when you see it?
Yeah, so we're focused in three areas of removing complexity. And complexity can be in all different ways, right? So we have Kaizen teams that have been historically focused in our manufacturing plants, removing complexity on the shop floor, right, and in those processes, where we're looking at fractions of a penny. When we make 10 billion syringes a year, a fraction of a penny matters. So getting lean and efficient and simple is really, really important. Expanding that across the broader organization has really been our focus. And so we're removing plant complexity, so consolidating manufacturing facilities even more to where putting manufacturing to where products are needed. Simplifying our portfolio. I mean, we had 7,000 different IV sets that we made, 6,000 different Foley catheters, blue and pink ones, yellow ones. You don't need all of that complexity. What are the real products that the customer needs that we can make sure we have the quality and the supply and availability and do that very efficiently? That's what's most important. And then we're very focused on removing organizational complexity. And so we've been focused on removing layers, removing checkers of checkers, as I say, in the workflow process. Again, just simplifying the way that work gets done, simplifying decision-making in the company, so that we're empowering the front line in the organization.
I wanted to follow up on empowering too. How do you convey to someone that they've got the authority to make a decision and to give them room to succeed or fail? That feels like it would be a really systemic change to how you're dealing with people or how you're managing people.
First is don't make the decision. So make sure they know you're supposed to make the decision. We actually rolled out a whole model in BD called the RAPID model, which defines who has different influences. Okay. And the D is obviously, the question is who has the D, and that's a very common way to start a meeting or a discussion is who has the D. And that team align on this person is supposed to be making the decision, and it's not a collective cohort of folks. It's this person makes the decision and owns the decision at the end of the day. That's a whole vernacular that we introduced in the company over the last couple of years.
Interesting. So let's talk a bit more about the pandemic and when did it become clear, I'm sure it was early on, that this was going to, well, it changed everyone's world, but this was going to change your business, or at least you were going to have to respond directly to what was about to happen. When did that become clear to you?
Yeah, it was very, very early on, and I'll never forget because it happened in the first 45 days essentially of when I took over as CEO, and over the next couple of months I had so many people come up to me and say, Tom, wow, we're so sorry, it's really tough, what a tough time to become a new CEO of a company, and I always had a very different reaction. I always said, what an unbelievable time to become CEO of one of the world's largest, most impactful medical technology companies in a pandemic where our purpose gets to be fulfilled more so than ever before. And I couldn't be more proud of our organization and how we did that. So the first time I knew something was awry was, I'll never forget, I got a text on my cell phone from our team in China who had sent me pictures of our service engineer who we had BD Max, one of our molecular platforms, at the China CDC in Wuhan. And they weren't allowed, and they wanted another instrument. And it was one of the first ever COVID tests that was developed, was on our Max in Wuhan when the outbreak first happened. And the whole city had been quarantined around. This wasn't even in the news yet, but I had gotten pictures of, and this story of a BD service engineer who had to park outside of the quarantine zone, and literally the photographs were him walking for 2 miles, dragging a BD Max on a dolly into the heart of the city, which we all know later, and I had no idea what was going on other than this does not look good, and they needed a BD Max for something that was going on in the city that was an outbreak, and then obviously it started blowing up from there, and we started understanding what happened. That was my first hint that something was going wrong in the world, and obviously we all learned the story probably over the next month. It started coming out, but that was very early on. After that, and as we began to really understand what was happening, I couldn't be more proud of our organization. We quickly identified 3 things that we needed to do as an organization and to fulfill our purpose and our role in healthcare globally. And our purpose is to advance the world of health. And so we said we need to do 3 things. We need to help get the world diagnosed. We need to help the world get well, and we need to help them ultimately get vaccinated. And so, we focused on doing exactly that. First, we assembled a team as a leader in point-of-care diagnostics. We focused on getting one of the world's first rapid COVID tests done. We were one of the first 2 companies in the world to actually develop a rapid test, lateral flow for COVID, and we ended up making hundreds of millions of those tests, in the subsequent couple years. That process, I'll never forget that. And again, we took the BD values that we hold very dear to and used that as a guiding light for the process that we went through. We always put patients first. Customers and patients first is one of our values, and I'll never forget that it was a Saturday evening, and at this point we said this is not a diagnostic business project to go get the rapid test developed. It only takes us 3 years to develop a rapid test. We need to do it in 3 months, and then we needed to scale it from normally 9 million tests a year we would make. We said we needed to make 12 million a month, and so very, very quickly. So this was, again, who are the best talents in BD? This is not a diagnostics business initiative. This is a BD company initiative, and we're going to take all the power and capabilities of the company and apply it here. So it was handpicking who's the best program leader in the company. It happened to be the general manager of our $2 billion pharmaceutical systems business, who was living in France at the time. So I called him. It was a Saturday evening. He was out on a sidewalk bistro in Paris with his wife drinking wine when I called him at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And I said, Kevin, I need to ask you a favor. Can you come program head this project for creating one of the world's first rapid tests, and that we need to get this done fast, and there's nobody better than you. And he goes, okay, where do you need me? You need to be in San Diego, and I need you there till it's done. Could be 3 months, 6 months, but we need you there. So when do you need me there by? I said, I'm thinking the plane's going to pick you up tomorrow morning, and we're going to get you there. I've actually already told the pilots. And he said, let me ask my wife. And he calls me back in an hour, and he says, I'm in. And we had the plane pick him up the next morning. And,
wow.
And he came there, and we did the exact same thing across every other one of the functions. I called someone that had invented our Veritor platform, who was in retirement, Rick. I'll never forget this discussion as well, and said, Rick, we need you back. Like, nobody knows this platform better than you. Just tell me what we need to pay you. And he said, I don't want you to pay me anything. He goes, I'm confident we can get this thing done, and I just want to make an impact. And he was in the next day working on this. So just seeing people rally.
Wow.
And so we ended up doing that. We ended up getting it done in 90 days. We ended up scaling it to 12 million tests a month very, very quickly. In those early days, I saw Brett Gerard just put out a book. He highlighted BD, and very quickly, the first shipments of that, 70% of U.S. nursing homes ended up with our platform, and it was one of the key platforms it was the platform that were protecting the elderly in those early days in nursing homes, screening people to make sure that they weren't bringing COVID into those systems. as that had already started becoming a major issue. Then we ended up making 2 billion additional syringes. We normally make 10 billion syringes in a given year. We made an extra 2 billion just to deliver 2 billion doses of COVID vaccines around the world. I'll never forget being in a discussion at the White House. I got to know the folks there quite well, and we were meeting with the head of supply chain, and he said, Tom, we need a lot of syringes here as part of this vaccination campaign. And he said, how many do you need? He said, I probably need, for the U.S. and some of our partners ex-U.S., I need 1 billion. And I said, when do you need it by? And he started laughing, and he says, do you realize there's no other company, when I ask them for 1 billion of something, that you just casually say, when do you need it by? But that's the type of scale and we ended up, doing that within a year. We made 2 billion additional syringes and provided those to vaccinate 2 billion people around the world. And then 90% of any patient that went into the hospital for COVID treatment was touched by our products as well. And our team did a phenomenal job, whether or not it was ramping up pump production for the field hospitals or Pyxis for the field hospitals, or even custom creating when PPE shortages were happening during COVID. Every time that a nurse would go between patient rooms, they would have to regown. And what's one of the number one reasons that you have to go into a patient room is because the damn pump alarms. And you got to go turn it off, or you got to go change the bag. And so we thought, how can we help this? So we had very, very few. We would make a couple hundred of them a year, these ultra-long IV sets, so that you could actually put the pump not in the patient room, but out in the hallway. And then you could interact with the pump without ever having to regown and go in the patient's room. You could stop alarms, you could change bags, and just have this super long tube go under the door into the patient's room. And so we set up a whole facility in Mexico just to scale those up at a record level that you would only ever want in this situation. But again, we couldn't be more proud of how the BD team really showed our values. We often say now, a crisis doesn't build character, it reveals character. And this is certainly a crisis that we saw kind of the character of BD be revealed in.
We'll take a quick break from this conversation to hear from our sponsor, Clary. Once again, here's an interview I did with Andy Byrne, the CEO of Clary. Andy, this is an exciting time for the medical device industry. How do you see the industry evolving in the future?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting, Tom. Generative AI is the future. You're hearing about it everywhere. We're already deploying it across these different revenue moments that I mentioned, and we're working with large language models. We've been delivering artificial intelligence now for 10 years, and we've been working with these large language models and generative AI to be able to shrink the time to revenue, the time it takes a company to get results from their revenue process. How long does it take a rep to update their deal and showcase where that deal is going to land? How long does it take a manager to look across 10 reps that each have 10 deals? That's 100 deals to figure out where they have risk, where they have opportunity. How long does it take to roll up a forecast? All of these different human-oriented moments are now leveraging generative AI and large language models to shift what would take an hour comes down to literally a second. What would take a week comes down to 30 minutes. What would take a month comes down to literally less than an hour. These are moments where we're going to see productivity and efficiency in a way that we've never been able to quantify before. That imagine driving that across all sales reps, all managers, all execs across a 13-week cadence. And if we can shrink the amount of time it takes to drive results, we call that time to revenue, using generative AI, these companies are going to see so much incredible top-line performance at lower costs that will drive higher shareholder value. So the big thing that's coming, like a freight train, is generative AI and changing the entire revenue process end to end.
Fascinating stuff. Thank you, Andy Byrne, for joining us on Device Talks Weekly. Once again, if you'd like to learn more about Clary, go to its website, clary.com. That's CLARI.com. Oh, and I think someone leans against a light switch in a few minutes, and the room will go dark, but the lights will come back on again, in case you're wondering what happened.
What lessons did you retain from that experience? How is the BD today different than the one in 2020? I mean, we all have snapped back to some version of normal, but we're not quite the same. How is BD not quite the same?
Yeah, I think, and this is true of, I'm sure, most everyone here. So many just med device companies had such a tremendous impact in helping the world move through the pandemic. And I know there's just wonderful stories that all of you can share in this. For us, I'd say that growth mindset and the idea of when you first put on the table, we're going to do something in 3 months that normally takes us 3 years, it's like that physically isn't going to happen. That can't happen. That's a crazy request. To actually do it, and to do it, though, in a way where you can see all of the power and of leaders leaning in. I'll never forget also some meetings early on there where the first secret, if we're one of the first people getting a test out, it was all around the antibody. Remember, antibodies are often grown in mice, et cetera, and so it's not like a virus comes out and suddenly there's amazing high affinity antibodies available the next day. That doesn't happen. And so we were working with DARPA, with universities all through Europe and Asia, just trying to source like who has an antibody and let's get it. And we were getting hundreds of antibodies. Any antibody we could find, we were flying to our research center in North Carolina to screen them to see what could actually have affinity enough to have a high sensitivity test. And so I remember once the team said, well, we found an antibody that we think is promising. It's in Germany. FedEx, because things were down, it was going to take a couple days to get it there. We said, we're going to send the BD plane there and get it to you tomorrow for screening. And I still remember the team said, you mean we're just going to send the plane there empty and we're just going to bring it back with a vial on it? Yes, because that saves 2 days, and 2 days matters in this case. When they ultimately thought that an antibody worked, normally the process would be, because you have a small scale, which may cost a couple $1,000s for the first lots, and then when you want to start getting tanks of it, it may cost $1 million for an antibody for full commercial production. So the first time we thought we had a very promising one that could go in, they said, well, we're going to go ahead and order the small lot. We're going to see how that works, and in 2 weeks then we'll know if we order the large $1 million tank. And we were meeting every night on this, and we said, let's go ahead and just order the $1 million tank now. In case it works, we want to save 2 weeks. And we ended up throwing away that $1 million tank of antibody. It didn't work. But what we did is, we took the accountability off the team. The leaders stepped in as a servant leader perspective and worked with the team. And that team still jokes and says, if we could run every project in BD this way, this would be phenomenal. We can't do that. That's good. But what it does is it shows the importance of leaders leaning in with the teams, removing roadblocks. It's something that we also train our leaders in BD to lead from a servant leadership perspective, right? You're there in the front lines. The leaders in BD are at the bottom of the pyramid. The customer is at the top. The front line is at the top. We're all at the bottom and here to serve the organization. We like that mindset as well because it means everything important happens above you. And as a leader, the whole idea, the kind of historical discussion of cascade messages down, et cetera, we all know that doesn't work. We think that inverted approach is much more indicative of how leaders need to think as well. It's hard work to get that message, to make sure that the very top of the flywheel is spinning that top gear, and you got to keep pushing the strategy, the message, right? What you want done until the entire organization understands it. So those are some of the lessons that we've taken. I'd say really that servant mindset, the servant leadership, the growth mindset. And then probably the other one was we spent a lot of time during COVID, and something that we've continued to do is we share the stories of COVID. Right? Advancing culture is a lot about sharing stories and making folks aware of what the norms are in an organization. We created a lot of next step norms that we wanted to keep as future norms going forward after COVID, right? That pace, that problem solving, that ability to see a challenge and just keep going through it. We saw that in spades in COVID, and so we've continued to build on that momentum, and I'm really pleased that stuck. The other thing is, BD is a 125-year-old and high-performing company. You can imagine we measure a lot. Metrics are important to us, right? We get paid on metrics. We have operating committee reviews every month to review a lot of metrics. But even more important than metrics for evolving a culture is, and something that, and there's obviously the saying, you get what you measure. We firmly believe you get what you celebrate as well. And I'd say that this process of celebrating what we did during COVID, celebrating the teams, and continuing to do that, we have a lot more things that we celebrate today than probably a couple of years ago, because that is what drives a culture as well. To people, it's a lot more fun than you getting what you measure. We still measure a lot, and we always will do that. But getting what you celebrate, I'd say that's something that's an extremely powerful part of driving culture and performance in an organization as well.
That's great. How long did that gentleman end up living in San Diego till the project was done?
He ended up retiring after that. He was done. We ended up keeping him in that business because then we needed to get it. Then it was Kevin. Well, now we need a flu-COVID combo test. And then we were one of the first 2 companies to get a flu-COVID combo. We're still one of the only 2 companies with a flu-COVID combo test. Okay.
I want to talk about your string of acquisitions and the spin-out of Embecta, sort of talk about more of the intentional change, and then if we have some time, we can maybe take 1 or 2 questions from the audience. But when we spoke on the podcast earlier on, I was surprised that you said you had 19 acquisitions over the last 2.5 years. I mentioned the spin-out. Talk about this intentional change that you've undergone at BD, bringing new companies in, new products in, and give us some highlights on those acquisitions and how has it changed the company?
Yeah, sure. So as part of our 2025 strategy, one of the things that BD has done over the 125 years we've been in existence, so suddenly got very...
Yeah, I know. It's your birthday. Happy birthday.
Someone from your past is going to walk out the aisle. But
there we go.
There we go. So back to the good question. I forgot the question. Okay.
We're talking about...
I know it. So on BD 2025, as we step back and looked at where we were, and something that BD's been has really built BD into what we are today is BD has had a great ability to identify future trends, get ahead of those trends, and create significant new growth opportunities for the company while transforming healthcare. So if you think about what built BD, BD was the first company that invented disposable medical devices, right? BD started making glass syringes. You'd have to wash them. And then BD invented the technology that you would put specific chemicals in polymers that would allow them to remain stable when gamma radiating them to sterilize them, and then scale that up. That's what put BD on the map as a medtech company, was inventing the first disposable medical devices. Then you ended up getting into healthcare worker safety around needle stick prevention, created a whole new wave of growth. There was a TB pandemic and HIV pandemic. BD ended up with CD4, CD8 monitoring, and the first automated TB diagnostics created a new phase of growth for the company. And so as we were looking at BD 2025, we identified that there are 3 irreversible forces that we see reshaping healthcare today and over the next decade, and that BD is extremely well positioned to make an impact in. And those 3 are smart connected care, robotics and automation, enabling the shift to new care settings, and the third one being improving outcomes for patients with chronic disease. And so as we looked at our portfolio, one of the things that is so exciting about BD is we are ubiquitous with delivering healthcare. I mentioned 40 billion devices we make a year. 90% of any patient getting healthcare in a hospital is going to be touched by a BD product. We serve more than 190 countries around the world. And that gives us a scale and a presence in most every healthcare system around the world. And we continue to focus on innovating. Most of our capital goes into that space from manufacturing capacity. But we ended up shifting about 65% of our R&D into those new transformative spaces. 95% of the M&A has been acquiring companies in those 3 transformative spaces, those spaces of smart connected care, robotics, automation, specifically around laboratory automation and informatics, medication management and pharmacy automation and informatics, and then nursing productivity technologies. Same thing is acquiring technologies, whether or not it's point of care technologies or home care-based technologies to help enable that shift to the new care settings, and then the same on technologies that meaningfully improve chronic disease outcomes. And so what we've been doing very systematically is shifting BD into those higher growth spaces that are transforming the future of healthcare, both organically and inorganically. That was also part of our spin of Embecta, which is a great impact company now, one of the world's leading pure play diabetes drug delivery companies. They have their own focus though, but it was not aligned with where we were focusing, right? That was a very much kind of a Walmart, CVS, Walgreens call point, different from where we were focused on pharmaceutical companies, on healthcare providers, on researchers in our other businesses. And we've been making tremendous progress there in reshaping our portfolio into these higher growth spaces, accelerating our weighted average market growth by well over a point over those last couple years. And that combination of doubling down, we both increased the level of R&D. We went from about 5.5% of revenue to over 6% of revenue spent in R&D today. We shifted it into those higher growth spaces, and then we've been supplementing it with quite robust tuck-in M&A, which if you look back, that hasn't been part of our legacy historically, right? Up until the CareFusion acquisition in 2015, the largest acquisition BD had done in its first 110-plus year history was a $300 million acquisition of a company in Utah, and then really very sporadic M&A prior to that. Then boom, $12 billion CareFusion, 20-some billion dollar Bard. No real tuck-in M&A in between because we had levered up to 4.7 times and we're focused on paying down debt. Now, a very consistent part of our strategy is utilizing our strong cash flow, often from that core business, to be reshaping our portfolio into these higher growth spaces. And you can see the impact in the company's growth rate today and in our impact on healthcare and where it's heading.
What does the automation and business look like? And how do you anticipated the challenges, that the stresses on workforce? Did that lead to the development of the strategy? Because we're certainly hearing more about it now than we did 3 years ago, but I'm sure it was building at that point, and that was something you were building toward.
Yeah. Well, we had started in laboratory automation with a company called Keystra that we had acquired, which really is taking off more so than ever now. Had already been growing strong double digits, but now is a rocket ship. Because of labor shortages, you can't find microbiologists, and this basically allows you to run a microbiology lab with 2/3 less staff. It's robots that are picking colonies and are streaking Petri dishes and are imaging Petri dishes, and we're using AI software to say what the bacteria are and auto-report that. We just got another FDA clearance last week on a new AI algorithm that's reading Petri dishes rather than having a clinician do it. But we've built, I think one good exemplar of our strategy has been we've built a $600 million pharmacy automation business just over the last couple of years. Started with a business we had acquired that came with the CareFusion acquisition, was based only in Europe. We then did a series of 3 other acquisitions, smaller acquisitions that were giving us pharmacy automation for surgery centers and long-term care facilities, a company called MedBank. We acquired another company that helped manage the will call rather than paper bags and coat hangers. And when you walk in and get your prescription, this was an automated system that would pull the prescriptions for the pharmacists. And then we recently bought Parata, which is the U.S. leading pharmacy automation platform, which is just the fundamental belief that there should be no pharmacist that sits in the back counting pills into an amber vial. That should always be a robot. It's way more efficient. It's way more accurate. There's basically 0 error rate with a robot doing it. There's a 5% error rate with humans doing it. And so that business now is a $600 million business. Those 4 acquisitions have created growing strong teens. And so we're really happy with that. We continue. I think what's exciting is those trends that we see reshaping healthcare. We've now built a number of very high growth platforms in the company. So I just shared with you one example of pharmacy automation, a $600 million business growing strong double digits. Think about what's happening in reshaping chronic disease management and the role of biologics, and specifically cell therapies and immune oncology, which as the leader in flow cytometry, none of that's really being developed without flow cytometry, right, which is the study of cells in the immune system. And so we've invested, that was an area we doubled down on as we reallocated our R&D investments. We're seeing very strong growth there. We grew 18% this past quarter, almost 19%, 18.7%, not that anyone's counting. In that bioscience business, we've got a super exciting new product launching here this quarter called FACSDiscover, which is going to be whole new category of flow cytometry that's going to come out. It was actually on the cover of Science magazine, this technology. I think one of the most advanced technologies in medtech. It takes pictures of cells in addition to fluorescence and allows you to sort on that at thousands and thousands of cells per second. That business is now over a $1 billion business growing double digits. Our Pharm Systems business, right, today in the first time ever, biologics represent a much larger portion of the pipeline than small molecules in pharma, and that's going to continue. And the shift to new care settings is that people are looking at not having to have people infused with drugs, but being able to inject those drugs and inject them themselves at home. And people are putting wearables on more so for injectables going forward. And so our pharmaceutical systems business, we've also have built that into a very big growth platform. That's a $2 billion business now, growing double digits for the last 11 quarters in a row, driven by that shift into biologics, driven by that shift now into wearables. We have wearable platforms that we're launching. Pens, auto injectors. Think about 60% of all biosimilar insulins are coming out in our insulin pen as an example. That's fueling the growth of that business and fits very much aligned with those trends that we've been seeing.
Right. And we'll if someone has a question, we'll take one question. Sean, if you get the microphone up. We'll let you have a drink of water.
That's a question.
Oh. Are you done making acquisitions for a bit? You digesting?
We're focused certainly on finishing the digesting Parata acquisition. We obviously have a very strong pipeline, though, and we'll continue to have tuck-ins, disciplined tuck-in M&A as an important part of our strategy. But we're really pleased with how Parata's gone. We're well ahead of our deal model. We're already seeing revenue synergies. We actually just increased our guidance this past quarter, which was our call was last week, and part of that was strong base business performance, but part of it was early revenue synergies on the Parata acquisition. So we're really pleased with how that's going.
Fantastic. All right, so we'll take one question.
Hi, thank you for sharing your experiences. So it's actually two questions. One, in your path to CEO, why do you think your predecessor chose you for the job? And then the second part of the question, thinking about M&A, is at what stage of a company's development do you guys seriously consider looking at an acquisition? So preclinical clearances, sales, and where do you really identify companies like that?
Yeah, it's a great question. On the first question, that's a trickier one. Again, because we promote inside, we always look for people who are first off is exhibiting the BD values, right, and our culture, and are going to continue that. That's certainly one. Obviously, had been in the organization and had advanced businesses. I'd led the strategy for the CareFusion acquisition and had made that happen. So the ability to continue the company, I'm sure he and the board had looked at continuing the company in the vision and direction that BD has the potential to realize while doing things differently as well. I think we're always looking to do things differently. You'd have to ask him otherwise. You go through a lot of intelligence tests and assessments and et cetera as well as part of those processes. And we always put through pools of people, right, anytime we're looking at that. And I've already started, right? As soon as I became CEO, my first meeting with the board was talking about my planning for my successor. Wow. And I already reviewed this July. I'll be going through an additional slate of candidates for me as for my successor. Even though I'm 3 years in, it takes time to develop. Again, I don't plan on breaking that tradition of being able to tee up very solid internal candidates to our board whenever that time for me to transition from the CEO role is. So that's just something that's important to us. And we'll put them through very formal development plans that will take many years, right? And we look at people at all different levels of the organization and reach in, whether or not given time horizons. So that's one. In terms of when we look at companies, so we've probably evolved that a bit. One of the things that we did when I came into the role was look at where have we been successful and where have we not been successful in doing acquisitions. And right or wrong, the reality is BD has not been successful in acquiring early stage companies and bringing them to market generally. Those tend to make up the vast majority of things that didn't go well. What BD, who are we? We are a very large manufacturer, so anything that we can scale up, we do phenomenally well. We have deep capabilities there. We have a huge commercial presence globally. Take the Bard acquisition. We doubled the size of the Bard business in China already since the acquisition there. That's all through leveraging our scale and breadth. And we can improve processes and systems very well. So when something is just about to be cleared and available for market or soon thereafter, that's a really good time for us to acquire. Or if it already has scale and we can take it to the next level, like a Parata acquisition. Parata was very, very strong in the retail sector. Think about going into a Kroger's or a drugstore, you'll find Paratas all over. Hospitals are looking to consolidate and create central pharmacies for themselves, these central pharmacy warehouses. They didn't have a presence there, so BD's presence as connected with pretty much every hospital on the planet, our ability to leverage them into that channel, right, that was a really strong match. And so what we've done is a little different. Rather than acquire product companies when they're earlier stage, we've been making more investments. So we've been making much more investments and looking at opportunities to stay engaged, maybe sit on the board, have a right to acquire, but let them do what they do best, which is get those products towards clearance and then come together and sharing the value creation as we go forward. I think that's our biggest learning. We really look, though, we have very specific spaces that we're focused on. There's never a time where someone just comes in and says, hey, Tom, how about this new space that we do an acquisition in? That's not going to happen. We have very specific areas that you're not going to see us get into cardiac or ortho. Those are not our spaces. That's not where we have capabilities to leverage. We have very specific areas that we know we have presence in, that there's new exciting growth areas adjacent to, that we're focused in building our funnels in. And so first that we look at is it in a space of interest? Second is, does it have a technology or a current market position that can make it a leader in the space? We're number one in 90% of the markets in which we compete. It's important that we believe strongly in being number one in pretty much all the spaces in which we compete is our goal. And so we want to make sure that we're acquiring companies that are already at the scale, like a Parata was already the leader in that space, or has a unique technology that we think can unseat whoever is the number one, when combined with our capabilities. And then the third is, the financials. We remain very disciplined when we do M&A on the financials. There's been tons of deals that we look at and they have met category one and kind of check the box on the second item, but it has a very low return and that doesn't fit, or it's highly dilutive to the company, and we don't, we'll step away from those for that perspective. So once kind of all three of those green lights turn on, then we move forward.
Fantastic. All right. Well, this is our time. Tom Polen, thank you for joining us for DeviceTalks Boston. All right. Well, that is a wrap. Chris Newmarker. It's a wrap. Wrap it up. In fact, you said it's a wrap last week. I didn't do my it's a wrap at the end of the...
I said it's a wrap, and then I forgot to say follow, subscribe.
I forgot to ask you about that. I was kicking myself later on. I mean, we could have had a live follow, and subscribe in front of dozens of people who are still in the audience. We could have got them to say it with us. Like next time. Exactly. Oh my God! Now you're hurting my heart. That would have been fantastic. Thank God. Thank you, by the way, to all the people who stayed and watched us do that interview. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah. That was cool, but it was nice that people hung around and asked questions and was part of it. So we'll definitely do that again.
I mean, Tom, we've both been at shows where it gets really sad near the end. Not our shows, but we've been to people's shows where it's been like, oh man, it's like there's people are getting out of here. They're like our show. That was nice. That was nice that it had such a good feel to it. People wanted to stick around to the end, so that's awesome.
No, I agree. Yeah, no, and there's two schools of thoughts when you're putting together an event like this. You want to have a killer keynote to end it, so people stick around. But you're there for 2 days. People grabbing flights, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock flights. They're not sticking around. You could have the CEO of whatever company up there, and they just got to go. So you wouldn't want to get someone like that on a stage and not be able to deliver the jam-packed rooms that we had for Tom Polen from Mike Mahoney. I mean, I could only see from the stage, which was very brightly lit, but look, it was stuffed. Correct?
Oh, it was stuffed, and it was impressive too. Yeah. Like the amount of people who wanted to talk to them after those talks as well.
They talked to them too. I was amazed. They had a line of people up the middle of the aisle, and both Tom Polen and Mike Mahoney just shook hands and took cards and shook hands and took cards. So thank you to those gentlemen for doing that, because that means a lot. Yeah,
it was really cool.
All right. So, Chris Newmarker, what do you want folks to do?
They got to follow, subscribe.
There it is. Follow, subscribe. If you're listening at home, say it along with Chris. Follow, subscribe. To the DeviceTalks Podcast Network. You'll get future episodes of DeviceTalks Weekly, Intuitive Talks, Stryker Talks, Boston Scientific Talks. Coming next month, Abbott Talks. We've recorded that first interview, so we're working on that right now. And hope to have much, much more. And also, of course, subscribe separately to Medtronic Talks. I'm actually doing my first interview for Medtronic Talks on Monday for this year's episodes. And we should have that out in a couple of weeks. So we'll be resuming that. Make sure you don't miss any of those podcasts. It's going to be a good one, too. A very high-profile business.
Who is it?
So you'll have to subscribe. Okay. I'll sign it over Zoom. Yeah.
All right.
So follow, subscribe, and please share this episode on social media. If you do, connect with me. I'm on LinkedIn, Tom Salemi, and connect with Chris Newmarker.
Chris Newmarker, just like a Newmarker. Find me on LinkedIn.
There we go. All right.
And that's a wrap. Let's thanks everyone for again, everyone who came out to DeviceTalks Boston last week. Bless you. Thanks so much for being part of that. Thank you for listening to this podcast. And tune in next week. We'll have another great episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast coming out directly to you.
All right, take care, everybody.
Are you going to stop laughing so we can get back on track?
Yeah, let's
I
get
can't
back
go on for 3 minutes about coffee, grinding coffee or not. Like, are you done?
I'm done. At least you.
All right, here we go.
At least